Power cut. Another power cut. We get so many in this area. Anyway, right, I'm gagging for a coffee. Jasper had jet lag last night. Actually, he's had jet lag for the last 3 nights. So he's been waking up at like 3, 4, 5 in the morning. I really need the caffeine. So I'm going to jump on my bike, my Apocalypse Transport, head to the local town, and hopefully they will have power and coffee. That's what I needed. Oh yeah. That's right folks, the power's back. I really should rethink my caffeine addiction. So today I thought, given that 2019 is over, and it seemed to be the year where quite a few car makers seem to cotton on to the reality that electric vehicles are coming soon and they need to jump on that bandwagon. However, not all car manufacturers seem to have quite got there. In October, I think it was, Mazda unveiled their new electric vehicle, the MX-30. But the battery is a little bit on the small side. Still rehydrating after my run. 6 kilometers earlier. Yes. Yeah, really getting back into this daily running thing. I know what you're thinking. There go those Tesla drivers with their bigger batteries are always better mantra. And I mean, honestly, yeah, bigger batteries are always better when it comes to EVs. I think, yeah, pretty much. At least until somebody invents a battery that doesn't wear at all through use. I personally think a bigger battery is a great idea. You don't have to use the extremes of the battery. You can just sort of use it right in the middle, which means that the cycle life doesn't really make much of a difference. It's all about calendar life, which means if you use the car a fair amount, you can potentially get hundreds and hundreds of thousands of miles of use out of that just one battery. That obviously brings the CO2 footprint for the entire life of the vehicle, including its manufacture, way down. Whereas, and this is, I think, at least this is the reason that Mazda have stated why they're going for such a small battery. Even if it's 35 kilowatt hours usable, it'd still be a tiny battery by modern standards. So why have they done this? Well, they say because it means that over the lifetime of the vehicle, it will have a better CO2 footprint than, say, a diesel vehicle, whereas a bigger batteried EV they think may in fact actually be worse for the environment. There are many different ways to work out the maths on CO2 footprint. I suspect that their numbers aren't quite right. I don't really see how they can be. It doesn't seem to be what most of the other car manufacturers and governments and scientists out there are saying, but I'm not a car maker, government or a scientist. So leaving that aside, having a battery that is that small in an EV is a real limiting thing. It really does make those longer journeys kind of impossible, because you can only really do about 100 miles tops before you recharge, and that's leaving a pretty thin buffer. So what is the solution that Mazda have come up with? I think the first time that I gave Mazda any real attention was when they brought out, I think it was the RX-8. I think that's the vehicle, the one with the rotary engine, the Wankel engine, or some funny named rotary engine. It's actually quite an awesome piece of engineering kit, with some advantages over ordinary piston internal combustion engines and some disadvantages, which I'm not going to get into right at this second, but it may suit quite nicely for use as a range extender, and that is exactly what Mazda have suggested they might be doing with this MX-30, giving it a range extender option, which would bring the range out to hopefully in the direction of sort of 300-400 miles, although that does depend on how much they're chasing the credits that you get for having a zero emission vehicle, because certainly in California it wouldn't count as a zero emission vehicle if the tank provided more range than the battery. I don't think this is a great piece of legislation, the way they've got that set up in California. It really reduces the incentive, and honestly, even if you put a huge petrol tank on it, the vast majority of people are going to charge it using electricity. Certainly in Europe they're going to, because electricity is many times cheaper per mile than petrol or diesel. So it's kind of simple. People go where the money is. Speaking of money, that could be the other big problem for the MX-30. They're planning on selling it for about $30,000, which is pretty much the same. Well, I suppose it is a little bit cheaper than most of the other EVs that you can get, but most of the other EVs aren't going to need a petrol engine to take you on to see your auntie a couple of 100 miles away. Having that petrol engine dramatically increases the number of things that can go wrong with your vehicle. For me personally, one of the advantages of an EV was leaving all of that complexity behind. I think it's one of the perceived advantages for a lot of people. Also, I think people just like the idea of, if you're going to adopt a new technology, let's just adopt it. And I think there is a sort of a slight preference for the simplicity of just going with a big batteried electric vehicle, and you don't get the performance. If you don't have a big battery, then for the most part the outstanding performance of electric vehicles isn't there in the same way. That's the real secret sauce of these fast EVs. It's having a big battery. I don't mind the looks of the MX-30, and I suppose I'm pleased that Mazda are doing something with it, but this is a vehicle that, if you ask me, belongs in about 2012. That's when they should have released this, a full 8 years ago. And if they did that in decent numbers, I think they'd do quite well with it. I do also suspect that perhaps part of the reason why they've gone for a smaller batteried EV than most is because, at least that way, if it does do well, they can sell a decent volume of them. Obviously, they're not going to admit that battery shortages are the reason why they can't sell lots of EVs. Nobody ever admits that. But I do think that actually does drive quite a lot of the decision making, because if you were to put a 70 kilowatt hour battery in these MX-30s, then for the same number of batteries, they'd only be able to make half as many. A lot of these Japanese car brands are very much focused on hydrogen as the future. I've done a lot of videos in the past where I've said that I think hydrogen is ridiculous and never going to happen, and I stand by that, but with one small caveat. In a world where hydrogen could be stored as a solid, cheaply, safely, not at any kind of extreme pressure, I think in that world, hydrogen could start to make some gains. Now, we're not anywhere near there yet, but I did read an interesting article on BBC News about a doctor, I think she was from the UK, who'd built a drone that flies on hydrogen, uses a sort of a solid hydrogen that is basically, as I understand it, they put the hydrogen down these tiny little nanotubes, which basically causes it to become a solid within that sort of those small spaces. I think that's how it works. I haven't looked into it too much. I probably should do that, because if they can do what they say they can, hydrogen could be a very good energy storage medium. The problem is you have to overcome the physics barriers, which are not overcome yet in the current generation of fuel cell vehicles, which explains why the current generation of fuel cell vehicles is not selling well. In fact, there were less sales in 2019 of fuel cell vehicles than there were in 2018. And when you look at the vehicles that they have on sale, they're not exactly what you'd call aspirational vehicles. You don't look at those and go, ooh, I can't wait for the day I can afford a fuel cell vehicle. Whereas when it comes to Tesla, because of the way they've pushed forwards EVs, and now also you've got things like the I-Pace and the e-tron from Audi and various other, and the Porsche Taycan, of course, let's not forget that. These are actually quite aspirational. People look at them and think, oh, I do want that. That's a good car. That looks good. It's fast. It's fun. Yes, sign me up. And if I have to stop and charge every couple of hours on long drives, I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. And most of the time when people get to the charging bridge, what they find is that actually it's extremely easy to cross. It's not a big problem at all. People, for the most part, don't need a full charge when they're doing, say, 300 miles, something like that. You can just give it an extra 15 minutes on a supercharger or some other high-powered quick charger, and you're good to go. So yeah, MX-30, do I think it's going to be a successful car for Mazda? No, I don't think so. I think the idea's got potential. I think in a lot of ways it should do well. I think in terms of its potential for getting a lot of people to drive the vast majority of their miles in an EV, I think from that point of view, it's great. But I just don't think people are going to go for it anymore. Not in 2020. Also, actually, while we're on the subject of people not going for it, it's got these annoying 3/4 back doors that you can't open unless you've opened the front door, which for anyone that's got kids is just really not convenient at all. I'm not a big fan of those doors. The i3 from BMW has got them. It kind of makes sense on that car because that car is tiny, but the MX-30 is not that small, so I kind of feel like it should have proper doors on the back. Yeah, I just can't shake the feeling that, you know, if you've got 30 grand to spend on a new vehicle, why don't you find the extra 10 grand and get yourself a Tesla? You will be infinitely happier. It will last probably quite a lot longer. It will certainly be a more prestigious vehicle for you to own if that is something that is important to you. I think it'll be quite a lot more fun to drive. What do you guys think about the MX-30? Is it likely to be a success for Mazda, do you think? Or is it just another also-ran compliance vehicle? Let me know in the comments section below. Oh goodness, it's time to go get Jasper from school. And I hope you've enjoyed today's vlog post. If you have, remember to like it, share it, subscribe if you haven't already, and follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you don't already. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye. I won't fall asleep on the way there. Wow. I really am. I'm just like, blah. Ugh. Right, I've talked about caffeine long enough. I don't know why I'm recording this. This is just like a little thing. I wanted to pick the camera up. You know, I'm going to get into the habit of this now. So I guess I'm going to feel a bit awkward for about the next half an hour. And then hopefully we'll be over that.